All right, good evening, everybody. Looks like we still got some people coming on in, so I'll give you just a moment. So obviously, as you can tell, I've got our webinar tonight, and Kevin will be back taking my usual Thursday morning spot. Just a little switcheroo. Still people joining, looking good. Good crowd tonight. Guys, welcome to the Hurley Investments Trade Findings and Adjustments of August, not 10th. Let me change that to August 17th. This here is just some of the things we talked about last Thursday in my last webinar. Went over Baidu earnings, which were fantastic, but gave guidance that was in line. And therefore that means Baidu, of course, needs to continue to fall for some reason, right? Had a nice little support building area here and then just tanked. Mostly, well, pretty much all of that is due to outside of that first day here on the 12th is pretty much due to economic numbers coming in for China that were poor, or at least didn't meet expectations. But I'm sure, as you know, Kevin went over most of that last night, so I won't bother too much with it. Just kind of following up with what we talked about last time. Talked about what is wrong with this market. Well, the fact that we're at all-time highs, tech stocks, as well as Visa. I listed Apple, Baidu, Facebook, Visa have all had great earnings and still have fallen down. But as we learned and talked about not last Monday, but the Monday before in Kevin's Monday commentary, government is going to print money and spend billions. There's a good chance our market will continue to go up in the long run. On the next pullback, money, quote unquote, should go to the companies that have had great earnings and haven't gone up or haven't been or have been beaten up unnecessarily. And that should is under quotation specifically because that still isn't a true statement. At least it hasn't happened that way, right? We've had Baidu, as I mentioned, great earnings, not a chance. Visa, great earnings. How did Visa do? Total crap, although it's also not continuing to sell off in the last couple of days that the market, or at least other things have. Our market had a bit of a dip today, but otherwise was not too much on the downside. Some of the other, like the Dow was a little worse with some of those, like Boeing dragging it down. But continuing with those, Facebook, good earnings. No, we don't want to pay for this. And really not much happening there. Apple, good earnings, and as luck would have it, it's at least trending in a good direction. Struggled today to continue that as it hit the overbought. So that's at least a nice sign. We'll see how that continues. Apple's one of the few that we don't have protection on, and that is the reason why. Holding that 150 from the bounce yesterday, it went through. That I think is mainly because after the earnings they fell down and have slowly come back up, right? This little push beyond 150 that it couldn't get up above back in July, I think has to do with a little what is their thing called? Worldwide Development Conference. Their yeah, WWDC, that they announce all their new stuff, especially this one coming up, which should be new phones, iPhone 13. And usually that's halfway through September, early October. They haven't announced it yet. So that's what I would think would be our somewhat of a catalyst to push Apple up to that point. And then of course it's a sell the news event, and the day they announce all their great stuff, everything comes back down. So typically how it happens. So that's just a little recap. And so what do I want to talk about? So let's see. Just following up with what Kevin talked about yesterday, we added protection to a couple of different shares that we have. Let's see, he added Bank of America. I have the, not that. Here it is. He listed it all right here conveniently for us. Even though I could totally just look it up on our trade history. Just saw it just a minute ago. Where did you put it? Okay, maybe I can't find it. Let's see. Here it is. Under Armour, Bank of America, Baidu. Just following up on the day for those. Armour looks good today. How about that? Calling a pretty much a top right there. We added 25 strike puts, and man, did those look good today. Yeah. Why did that happen on this day? What's that big red mark for? It is retail sales numbers coming in below expectations, and pretty much all the retail stocks, including a Target, had a nice fall from 260 down to about $5. Walmart was probably, I guess Walmart held up fairly well. Costco held up pretty well too. They're kind of the outliers. I would have thought Walmart would have done about the same thing as Target, but you kind of never know. Let's see. Bank of America. Maybe we called this one a bit wrong. We had added protection for 41. It looked good through the morning. Kind of has held that. Thing with the banks is, they've got all of the stimulus, what am I trying to say? The bond buying by the Fed looks like we have a chance of that tapering, as they call it. Having a taper tantrum is the phrase that the talking heads like to talk about, of what will the market do to react to the Fed tapering, where they'll slow down their buying of government bonds and so on. And that is likely to affect the banks negatively. And so it made sense even though as it didn't look like it made sense today, it made sense in the grand scheme of things and got protection on for Bank of America. And mostly we're looking at all of this protection because of just going back to earnings and the reaction and our cyclical time period here of the end of summer, beginning of fall, where we typically have a market correction. So why start to get back on protection after we just had earnings? Answer, because we are coming to a cyclical period at the beginning, thank you autocorrect, of fall, when our market likes to have a correction. And oh, couldn't fix that nonsense. Earnings were good, but the market doesn't seem impressed. Also, economic numbers aren't necessarily looking great. At least they're not cracking home runs lately with our retail sales numbers, jobs, stuff like that. So, what do I think? Well, why don't I throw this to you guys? What do you think is going to cause or be a part of this cyclical trend in the fall that will cause our markets to fall? If there's something that could happen, something that you're worried about maybe, what do you think it could be? Negative news wise, whatever it is, that could turn our markets from all the way up here to falling back down here or continuing on down here. Throw me a line, doesn't matter. Just send a thought suggestion in. All right. Abraham says war. Ooh. Maybe Abraham, I'm interested to hear you elaborate just a little bit. We're gonna go to war with Afghanistan or something after we just pulled our troops out. Maud said more COVID bad news. Oh, yes. Abraham, I think Bill may have filled in what you were talking about. China putting ships and other personnel near Taiwan. Okay, that makes a little more sense. I'm going to assume, Abraham, and tell you right back that that's what you're referring to. That's definitely bad news. So we'll put yes, Maud. I was kind of going with that direction. The Delta variant that seems to be subverting a lot of the, or at least some of the good news that we've had on the vaccine, not as effective against, and people that are refusing to get vaccinated, it's kind of continuing to burn through, right? So I'll say mod Delta variant continuing to I'll say be a worry of shutting back down. Again, to some degree. So that's what's kind of on my mind. Or China putting ships by Taiwan. Ida, let me get back to that question. Abraham said people are getting absurdly extremist or irrelevant. Subjects are also important. Let's see, China has seen weakness on the world, and they're having plan long term that nobody can stop. Well, maybe. I think a lot of the world has lost a lot of trust in China because of the virus. I know a lot of people kind of like to just point to Trump complaining about that, but I think it is somewhat of a not unspoken, but not really lauded about, maybe even slightly subconscious, that people don't like how China handled things, and you know, whether or not they like it, are kind of getting the blame. I could be wrong, but that's kind of what I think, Abraham. I think they are also, speaking of China, I think they're at a big setback as well from COVID, and they're shutting a bunch of stuff down to get the Delta variant under control too. So yeah, not sure. I think they're preying on, at least succeeding in preying on weakness in world control or whatever. Maybe they still are to some degree, and that's kind of been their MO, to try and get more power and influence, for sure. Not taking that away from your statement at all, but I do think right now they're kind of struggling to deal with the current fire. Let's see, Ida. Could it be profit taking why stocks fall with good earnings? Of course. And that's probably the biggest reason. Let's see. Bill, man, we're getting awesome comments tonight. Bill, between the CCP flu and economic problems, China may have to do something to divert population's attention. Well, I don't know that they would want to do that by starting a war. Not sure if that was the direction you were going with, but I think the way they're trying to influence things is by lying about their um, COVID numbers and problems, like they have been. But I do like some of these comments, very interesting thoughts. Some things I hadn't thought of, so very good ideas. Yeah, Bill, for sure. Making hay with through threats and possibly movements in South China Sea. Yeah, maybe taking advantage more control over Taiwan for sure. Let's see. Ida, I told you I'd get back to yours. But first, I was trying to think of any other things. That basically is what we talked about. Delta variant, war, China being China. Yeah. I also mentioned earlier tapering. I gave that one to you. The Fed tapering, bond buying. So, some good ones to look out for. You could also say um, more economic, uh, how should I say this? News that isn't positive. All right. So back to you, Ida. Is it profit taking? Why stocks with good earnings fall? And I would say absolutely. Um, Probably not with Baidu, as it's fallen for months now. That has everything to do with the situation with China and everything else surrounding it. But maybe this first bit on Apple, for sure, some profit taking, but that didn't last long. Really like the comeback in Apple right now. We'll see how long it lasts. Um, Man, keep forgetting to talk about Disney. I'll be honest, this one really gets my feathers ruffled. Opened up at 186 a day after earnings, and man, it was just looking like finally we would love to see Disney take off. They had their parks coming back. You heard Kevin talk all about this Monday, I'm sure. Um, but man, opened up at 186 and came all the way down, closed at 181, still at a profit from the day before, but just came back down and touched the 200 day to day. And we never even, well, we did get a chance to take off puts for earnings, but with it drawing down so much, it just didn't seem like a good idea. And at least until today, that seemed like the right plan to just keep the 177.50 puts in place and, keep things protected till we see different change, right? And man, look at that volume, huge volume on that day too. Just don't get it. So I don't know about that one, Ida, if that certainly could be profit taking, but I would have thought profit taking would have came at a negative the day after, and not such a huge positive. But there's obviously a mix of buying and selling that day, right? So I guess we can say with Disney, it's the institutions are kind of split. Big buying, big selling, big volume. What was another one? Under Armour. And where were they? The 12th, something like that. So they had a big pre-earnings run. So it very could be a profit-taking situation. But I also think that, like I said, today has a lot to do with those retail sales numbers. Because the market is always forward-looking, it kind of makes sense why it might change direction after earnings, but maybe those could be it. I think Under Armour specifically has more to do with those retail sales numbers and how the market's forward looking. Just to kind of wrap up that thought. Let's see. Abraham made a good point. Don't forget that stocks that come back from COVID are subject to any remission that might happen with COVID, for sure. And of course, that falls in line with Boeing and, as we talked about, Disney. So for sure, you're right. However, what might be a little different, I don't know that it's going to happen exactly the same. I mean, let's say hypothetically that things start shutting down a little bit for this Delta variant, and stocks start to sell a bit. What we have that are different are a vaccine. We have companies that are willing to keep things open, try and do the masks. It never happens the same way twice with just different circumstances. I wouldn't expect the same kind of sell-off unless there's other negative influences, like the Fed just really ramps up their tapering and just start to talk completely different about getting rates raised because of inflation's just starting to get crazy, stuff like that. So couple other things, let's see, we added, just to talk about what we've been up to, talked about the stocks we had protected from yesterday, did a little more today, as we saw. You can see the chart here with Boeing falling below the 200-day. Another one of those frustrating ones where Boeing starts to take off, get protection off when it gets above the 50-day and looks great, and probably should have got it back on after it broke the 50-day on this day. But it also kind of looked like it was holding the 200-day until, of course, this morning, and it just kept going. So we've got protection on, and let me remind myself, let's see, 225, and at least a little profitable for the day. So to your point, Abraham, probably a lot to do with the Delta variant and the looming idea that things might get shut back down or slow growth and being forward looking. Boeing just coming back down. Super frustrating. So undervalued, and they were profitable. I don't know. Just seems awful silly. Um, let's see. Trying to remember. Ford and JP Morgan were the other ones. So we're getting JP Morgan back in line kind of with Bank of America. We added protection yesterday. Kind of similar looking chart and started to fall below that 157.50 was kind of our line in the sand. And getting protection on with that. And I think we weren't able to find 157.50 puts. We had to go all the way to 160 was the closest. To protect for a taper tantrum. The other one was Ford. Oops. Ford. 143 contracts we got on for Ford. 13 strike puts. Let's look at Ford. So this 1330 was our line in the sand. Couldn't get puts on until 13, but they are bearish. Couldn't hold these support levels. Did hold this resistance, or excuse me, this pivot point, but kind of feel like their situation, because it is because they're struggling with chips and struggling to fulfill what is great demand for their trucks. They could still be in for some problems for the short little while. So, in fact, this is going to be my suggestion for you as a trade tonight to end things off. Protective puts on Ford. Now it could bounce off of that pivot point, so I would just be kind of watching it this week and keeping an eye on October 13 puts is where we have protection on. And if you have shares of Ford that you're working with yourself, I think getting some protection on there might make a lot of sense. So I know we've had this for a trade on shares, few times. So if that is your case, then protective puts on Ford seems to make sense, especially out to October longer term, where we've seen this bearish trend for a little while here in this channel that seems to keep within that range going down. Guys, are there any questions or other thoughts? Anything else you'd like me to look at or explain or update you with? We had a good discussion, loved all the comments. Thanks for all of your thoughts, good things I hadn't thought of. Let's look at performance for the day. Anyone have any idea why Baidu would be positive for today? You can see this is our today. These are the positives and negatives for the day. Biggest winner for today was Baidu. And this is really more of a test to see if you listened to last night's webinar. Why would we be positive today so much on a stock that has lost another $3 from the day before? Going once, going twice. That's right, William. William got it. $125, $150 puts on shares of Baidu, along with, and they're kind of scattered around, 88, I think it's actually 101 puts on 165 and another 27 some odd on 157.50. Few different protections at a few different places for different shares. But all in all, we've got all shares protected at 165 and 157.50, divided between the two. And then for all of the shares, again, we have the second set. So I know we have 3 different puts here, but it's really just 2 levels of protection, 2 sets of protection, because these 157.50s are just over these 21 or 27. I thought there were maybe scattered around a little bit. And between these 2 and these 150s have 2 sets of puts making up all of this today. So we got 31,000 here. Stock lost about 52,000. We're up 31,000 on 150 puts, another 8,000 on 157.50s, another 36,000 on almost 37,000 on 165s. Those look good. Just a little pat on the back. I'm glad we did that. Our biggest loser, Under Armour, down 39,000 today. Let's look at where it could be. just to try and be on the positive side. Never love to see your stocks down, but man, over half of that movement we're making up with those 25 puts. Could have been down 92. Those are still very positive things. So I like it. Let's get some more shares in Under Armour, which has done well. Going back to your point, Abraham, those stocks that fell and struggled through the COVID and all of the comeback, Under Armour was one that benefited. So we get another sell-off and another shutdown. Who knows that maybe we're really actually helping Under Armour and a few others out. Maybe our tech stocks again, who knows. Not seeing any other questions again. So guys, that really does it for me. Thanks for joining me. And again, Kevin will be here Thursday morning, so don't miss that. Again, thanks for all the comments. Really appreciate it. Great webinar tonight. Guys, have a wonderful evening, and we will. Yep. Thanks, Abraham. Good night. Take care, guys. Have a good one.